Hey, what's good? It's me, Tim Keys, and I'm back with another video. If you have been following my comparison series with Reason, this video is my third installation. I want to compare Reason with Native Instruments. And for this one, I want to do something a little bit different because I want to do more of a direct comparison so I can give you a breakdown of what you are getting. If you decide to get Reason and use it as a plugin, or if you go the Native Instruments route. I want to show you how these things compare against one another. And again, I want to try to break these down in a more direct comparison. So what I want to kind of do is break it up in into different groups of how sounds are synthesized, or samplers, or the combinator versus reactor, a massive versus a subtractor, and go from there. So let's get started. I'm gonna open up my folder so you can see it, and we're gonna, if you know anything about Native Instruments, Native Instruments, the complete you know bundle, if you will, there are at least 3 or 4 different versions of Komplete that you can get at this point. There's the free version that anybody can use getting started. Thank you, Native Instruments, for that, because for individuals that want access to good sounds and get their foot in the door, anybody can use that and have access to some really good polished sounds. If anyone knows anything about Native Instruments, over the last 10 years they have really become an industry standard, so to speak, in terms of both the sounds as well as the type of technology that they give to their customers. And yeah, they have some really good products. So the first one I want to go over in the bundle, and there's several different versions. I'm going to kind of fluctuate between Komplete and Komplete Ultimate. I personally own Komplete Ultimate. I don't have the collector's edition, and I'm still on 12. I didn't upgrade to 13 yet. Um, so, but I wanted to give you just an idea of what they do. So, gonna open up Kontakt, and I'm gonna wait on this real quick to finish thinking. But yeah, if you know anything about Kontakt, Kontakt is Native Instruments' flagship sampler, and it has been around for years, and it has really become a powerhouse of a sampler over the years. And I'm waiting on this thing to upload. So while it's loading, I'm going to talk about it. So yeah, Kontakt has been around for years, and it is pretty much an industry standard when it comes to samplers. And the advantage of a Kontakt is the amount of libraries that it can come with. I've been using Kontakt for a while, since Kontakt 4. And, you know, you can use all of those instruments, you know, to make your sound. Now, the older version of Kontakt, I will say, used to allow you a greater range of formats that you could use for samples. Like, you had waveforms, you had OGG files, you had sound font, and I think sound font 2 files. Like, the older versions of Kontakt allowed you for a broad range of sample formats that you could use as a sound source to manipulate. They have great filters in the sample. I'm going to see if I can find one for editing. And no, I didn't put my hard drive in. Pardon me. Let's wait it out. I'm gonna go back to the library. I mean, so while I'm waiting on that to load, I'll give you an example. Analog Dreams. I just want to make sure the sound is coming through. Awesome. The Play series has been out for a few years now, roughly since about 2018, and it's really nice with the Play series as of Kontakt 6, because what they have done is allow for the use of wavetables. So with Kontakt 6, their newest version, they no longer give you the same amount of range of samples to utilize. I think at this point it's primarily like your standard waveforms, and then it's, you know, wavetable synthesis that you can use. They still allow for granular synthesis, which is also very nice. I don't have the newer libraries that reflect that, like Nori. Nori is a piano library that uses granular synthesis, and some of the other, I can't think of the names right now, but there are at least 3 or 4, you know, high-end libraries that lend itself more toward soundscapes, but they also can give you granular synthesis out of the gate. And so Kontakt is a very powerful device that will allow you to make multiple types of sounds. I like that chord progression. I keep playing it in every video. I might switch it up one day. But that's Una Corda. It's a remarkable piano. It, you know, basically this came from sampling an actual Una Corda, and the sound source and how they work the samples into this product is second to none. I'll do one more if I can take that off. Let's do strum acoustic. So yeah, there's a lot here. Now Kontakt can also handle, if I'm not mistaken, Kontakt can also handle Rex files. So you can play back loops, you can do Rex files, you can do your standard sample-based synthesis. So let's see if I can find it, what I'm looking for. If I can, I'll substitute it with something else. And I can't find it. Yeah, there we go, retro machines. This will serve the purpose. Analog machines. So mind you, this is sample. Mind you, it's not like having an actual analog synthesizer at your disposal, but I mean, the source material here is analog synthesis, or not synthesis, analog synths. People sampled analog synthesizers, and that's how they were able to capture this sound. Now, the one thing I will say Kontakt does not do is Kontakt cannot directly sample from its device. So you have to have a third-party plugin, third-party piece of software, if you will, in order to, do your samples. But once you get the sample into the device, Kontakt can easily fill the space of Reason's NNXT, their NN19. In some ways, it can fill the space of Mimic, and it can, in some cases, fill the space of the Dr. Octo Rex, because it can handle Rex files, and to some extent, it can handle grain, because Kontakt does have the ability to implement granular synthesis. Which one does what better? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. But when I hear those demonstrations of those third-party libraries that Native Instrument has out, I'm greatly impressed. So now, if you are in Reason, I'm just going to pull it up again. Gosh. Reason Rack. Wanted to upload. Every time I pull up the Reason Studios in my software, it always pulls up the beta version. And everybody can see it. That's okay. I also have the actual Reason 12 on my computer. So I think it's funny that it primarily will pull this up, but it won't pull up my actual Reason 12. But I have access to both licenses. So anyhow, so yeah, Kontakt will easily fill these 2 or 3 spaces. The grain sampler, I would also kind of put that in a different category. Grain sampler reminds me of Native Instruments Form, which is a Reaktor-based library. I'll get to that. Now, if you were in Reason, you have synthesizers such as the Subtractor, synthesizers such as Thor, and the Maelstrom. And for the most part, all 3 of those synthesizers implement some form of subtractive synthesis, meaning that regardless of how the sound is generated under the hood, it is filtered out. Regardless of the filter, low pass, band pass, notch, format, comb, the sound goes to a filter, and then it is shaped to ultimately have the output. Subtractor has your standard waveforms, but it also has your single cycle waveforms that are distinguished by their numbers from 5 to 32, which will give you some very rich tones. Maelstrom is similar. It has grain table synthesis. I'm not going to go over that, but I just wanted to show you that, to keep that in mind. However, Native Instruments has Massive. And so we'll do the oldie but goodie. Massive is also, it is a wavetable synthesizer. See, these are the basic waveforms that you can choose, and depending on what you pick, you can, blend through different sounds. You have 3 oscillators, and this uses a more standard approach to wavetable synthesis compared to something like Europa. In terms Europa is more or less, it generates its sound through spectral analysis or spectral waveforms. It's still wavetable, but it's done from a spectral standpoint as opposed to just samples. However, when it's all said and done, you're going to take both of those sounds and you're going to run it through filters. And in that sense, Massive really shines because Massive can replace a subtractor. It can replace a maelstrom. It can replace a Thor. And yeah, you can get just as gritty in your sound or just as ambient and ethereal as you want to. I'm waiting on this to load up. I got too many sounds in. Oh man, don't do that. I got too many sounds in Massive. All right, maybe it's done thinking. I apologize for the delay. Please bear with me. We'll go here. What I'm doing right now, doesn't really give, you know, justice to the power of Massive. Massive has been considered an industry standard plugin for years. It came out back in 2007, and I mean, it was the go-to plugin for a lot of people. There are hordes of different YouTube videos talking about, how to make a sound on Massive. So yeah, Massive can kind of fill in that space. You also, with, Komplete 13 standard, you'll get Massive X, which, carries on in that wavetable synthesis legacy. In my opinion, it didn't make the same impact as something like Massive did for its time. I would even go on the record to say that in a lot of ways, some of the other plugins like Pigments definitely outshine Massive X. Even plugins like Sector have the ability to allow you to make your own wavetables inside the plugin. But where Massive really shines, Massive X, pardon me, is there are hordes of wavetables that you can use out of the gate. And there are some amazing sounds in Massive. If I can find a good one. Let's do the Rustic Wind. I need to quit doing that chord progression. I mean, it's not spot on in terms of having a woodwind instrument, but it's pretty close and it's pretty convincing. Let's go to flutes. And let's find the synth pads. might be choking my computer. But that's pretty impressive. You can also use the noise oscillator to import your own samples. And so, yeah, in my opinion, even though Massive X, you know, some people may say Massive X is overshined by or outshined by other plugins such as Pigments and even, oh gosh, what is that plugin? Serum. Shame on me. You know, Serum. Serum is a powerhouse in its own right. But in my opinion, this thing can hold its own. And if you have it, it is definitely a useful tool that can get you a broad range of different sounds. And I'm just going through some of the libraries. There is Absynth. And Absynth, again, at its core, it is another subtractive based synthesizer in the sense that you have 3 oscillators you can choose from. You can have a sample, you can use audio input, you can have a granular source, single, double. I've used this a few times, pardon me, but there is so much. A word. I don't want to do that because I don't want to be in the sample. Let's be in single. There are so many different waveforms you could choose from to get your sound. You got so many envelopes, so many LFOs. You got 3 LFOs. You do a waveform draw mode. Once you have your stuff in, you can morph it. You're able to analyze your waveforms through the spectrum. And then, I mean, if you get stuck for sounds, you can always hit this mutate button. But this thing can do everything from, you know, your standard modes of sound design, but you can get really creative and get some outer space type tones. You could even get into drum synthesis. Let's do the cowbell. So there are things like that. Let's not go too far out. And I did. I couldn't resist. We'll go back into instruments. None. Let's mutate the 808 clap. Do it again. There we go. I want to get out of my drums. Let's go into vocals. And actually, now let's go back to the browser. Alien Nature. Let's hit that. So the mutate can be hit or miss, but the mutate basically implements a form of randomization, granular synthesis to change that sound and make it sound like whatever. So if you ever get stuck on, you know, inspiration, The mutate button is your friend. And Absynth 5 to me was like Omnisphere before Omnisphere became the powerhouse that it is. Absynth, it enabled you to use your samples to make all sorts of cool tones and different sounds back when Omnisphere version 1 was still more or less a closed box device, if you will. All right, so that's Absynth. You got Battery. Battery is Native Instruments top tier drum machine. It doesn't get a lot of press at this point because, I mean, Machine has really kind of taken over. But Battery is amazing in its own right. I'm not going to go through I've done a video called All About the Drums where I kind of break this down into more detail. Now, one thing about Battery that makes it different from something like, Reason's Kong is that Reason's Kong has the ability to do physical modeling synthesis. So if you're someone that likes to design your drums in that fashion, then I would lean towards Kong over Battery. However, in terms of having something that can process your samples, your drum sounds, this is pretty stellar for what it is. And I'm using the stock drums that's in here, but you can put your own drums in and you can get to work. So if you have that Beethoven /Spins 808 kit, that Pyrex kit that you want to just throw in, you can put that in there. But Battery it's definitely meant for your sample based synthesis for drums. And there's nothing wrong with that because it sounds amazing. When I'm not reaching for Kong, I'll use Battery. It's my next go-to. And sometimes I'll have a track where I use them both. So let's do FM8. I'll throw that in. If you're watching, thank you for your patience. I appreciate you. And shout out to all the new subscribers and people who have joined in to watch. I appreciate you. I want to thank you. Now, Native Instruments has an FM plugin called FM8. And FM8 has been out for quite a few years now. It is a powerhouse in its own right. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So just like in your standard DX7 or even your DX7 from Arturia that I showed in the last video, FM8 has, it uses 6 operators and it uses sine waves. But you also have these other these other waveforms that you can use in order to make your sounds. You don't have the formats in Arturia's version, but they have like additive waveforms that they use. You have different filters that you use. You also have an easy, they call it the easy morph, which is basically a way to, maybe not so easy. Shouldn't have did that. All right, shouldn't have done that. I'll stick to the browser because FM synthesis for me is probably one of the harder ways of sound design to work with, But once you get a hold of it and master it, there's so much that you can do with it. Not exactly like a brass instrument, but very, very close. I'm only hitting one button. And again, just the sound that you can make with this is incredible. Now, Reason does not have a dedicated FM synthesizer out of the gate. Thor has the ability to implement FM synthesis, but it does it in a different way. I think in a more linear way as opposed to Native Instruments FM8. Reason has released Algorithm, and it is a very powerful device in its own right. However, you have to buy Algorithm third party. So if you spend $400 now or $500 on Reason later just to get into its ecosystem, then you have to spend another $100 to get Algorithm. Pardon me. If you spend, I think it's $600, and sometimes Native Instruments, they have sales throughout the year. You spend the money for Complete Standard, you get FM8 out the box. And there are some very nice sounds in this device. If I could find the Rhodes, I would show you what I'm talking about. They have a Rhodes piano QRS. Nope. I went too far back. They have a Rhodes piano in here that is very much convincing. It's not like the 80s Bell EP sounds that are so common in FM synthesizers. They had a very convincing patch that sounded like a Rhodes. And so it showcases how powerful FM synthesis can be. If you were a Reason user and you were fortunate enough to get their PX7, it also has a convincing Rhodes sound. Like it's a Rhodes, not just the EP, but a Rhodes sound. Yeah, one thing about FM synthesis, it's very flexible, and you can make a lot of different sounds once you get a hold of the programming. One day I'm going to sit down and really double down on FM8 and some of the other FM synthesizers I have. Last but not least, and I'm not showing everything, I'm focusing more on the instruments. Native Instruments has a boatload of effects that are also pretty stellar. They have some EQs and some compressors that are remarkable. They also have some reverbs and delays that are amazing, such as the Reflector and the Reflector XT. But right now I got Reaktor pulled up, and so Reaktor is a powerhouse of a synthesizer in its own right. With Reaktor, you have the ability to play, the standard or third-party libraries that come with this device, or whatever you purchase or download. You can also, they have blocks, and you can build modular racks. I think they're monophonic. I don't know if they have any that are polyphonic, but They have the new blocks that's been out for, it's not brand new, it's been out for years, and it's remarkable in its own right. So you can get that if you want like the feel of having a modular rack, but you don't necessarily want to have to spend thousands of dollars to buy like a Euro rack. This can kind of get you into that space. But you can also build your own custom synthesizers. So the process is a little bit different compared to a combinator, but you get the ability to build a full-fledged synthesizer in Reaktor. A synth, a sampler, any sound effect, anything you want to with the DSP in, that's included in here. So let's pick this up. So I have a few libraries on the Reaktor end. And so this is Contour. Contour uses a synthesis method similar to like Casio. I think it's like the phase distortion synthesis. If I'm not mistaken, don't beat me up if I got it wrong. But the same type of synthesis that's in like your older Casio based, like your old Casios that use that type of synthesis method, this is that implemented in its own way, the Reaktor. And let's see if I can get some, we'll do soundscapes, ecosphere. Now, Reaktor is CPU intensive. And as you can see, it can take up a lot of juice from your computer. But, you know, it sounds pretty good. Here's another library. I don't want to save any changes. This is not what I wanted. Shame on me. This is an effects. So molecular is an effects unit, if you will. It's not an instrument. So if you have this connected to an instrument, this is the one I wanted. I wanted Monarch. But if you have this connected to an instrument, it allows you to get all sorts of cool sounds as an effect. Now, Monarch is Reaktor's take on, I think it's the Moog Model D. It's not polyphonic, it is straight monophonic, but it will allow you to get that Moog sound. Let's take a look. Let's see what I have for. So there's that. We'll do polyplex. I'll just do the ensemble. As you can see, with polyplex, they have their kicks, their one-shots, their percussion, snares, and so forth. But I'm only going to show you the drum side once it loads up. Come on. I've never been a good finger drummer, and it's even worse if I have to do the drums on the keyboard. But you can hear the sounds. You hit one of these. Roll the dice again. One more time. So you get some randomization every time you hit one of these knobs. You can utilize your own samples. I have never bothered to do so. I pretty much use this when I want just a different set of drums. To me, this is very reminiscent. I won't say reminiscent. When Reason's Oomph came out and they, released that product, it definitely reminded me of Polyplex in terms of the type of sounds that they were going for. I would tend to lean more towards Polyplex over Oomph club drums, although those sound pretty good in their own right. But yeah, Polyplex is very powerful. Let's see what else we have. And most of the instruments that I'm using so far, they all come standard in, Komplete 12, Komplete 13. I'm not utilizing the ultimate collection bundle. If I can find Form. All right. So yeah, Reaktor, the strength of Reaktor is very similar to Kontakt in that it is essentially a hub that will not only allow you to have different libraries that produce different sounds and have different tones. Reaktor can do everything from, as you can see, it will allow you to do everything from your standard old school analog synthesis to drum samples and drum synthesis to granular synthesis. Now, in my opinion, when Form came out, to me, I think this is what Reason used in part as inspiration to create Grain. Form is amazing because, like Grain, you can put your samples in, and then you go into the sound section. You have an additive oscillator, if you will, which is basically, it's just an additional, waveform that you can use, and it can vary from sine to a modified pulse wave. You can modify Form's oscillator. You have effects that you can use. You can change the speed. You can alter the motion through curve presets. You have different performance modes that you can use. I can go in here and further modification, control the octave. I think that's key tracking. Nope, it's not key tracking. This device really lends itself to exploring sounds and pushing your samples to different places. So, when people talk about sample-based synthesis and creating different sounds, when you get into that granular synthesis space, you can do all sorts of stuff and take not sampled, standard sounds and make them sound out of this world with devices like this. You got the effects section. All right, let's get out of there. Go in the factory, see what they got for. Let's do some keys. Double sign. I don't know what I'm playing, and I'm trying not to play Mortal Kombat. All right, so that's form. We'll do one more example. Ducky. And let's see. Journey end. Not bad. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with these sounds, and this is all coming from one device, and that's just out of the gate. And with the new Komplete 13, they have additional players, in the Kontakt library. They have additional sample libraries. I think they even have some additional plugins like Super 8 that is its own take on, recreating analog synthesizers. So, yeah, that's Native Instruments and their library. And again, I'm not using everything because, again, you go into the effects. I don't want to use rewire. Yeah, here we go. Let's see. Guitar rig. Guitar rig is amazing. You can use that to run your guitars, obviously, or any other sound source you have for that matter, to really stretch out your sound. And I stopped at Guitar 5 or Guitar Rig 5. Guitar Rig 6 looks amazing. I just haven't upgraded yet. They have other plugins, ROM, which again, they're really good for the effects that they give you. So as Reason, transitions to that $500 mark, it is now getting into that space where, from a price point standpoint, it's really competing with Native Instruments. Now, you got to keep in mind, Reason is also a DAW. And regardless of how you feel about the DAW and the quality of the DAW itself, it is still a DAW. So you get that feature with Reason. Reason is going to provide you with a level of flexibility that's different from Native Instruments. So when you get Reason, you're getting a collection of instruments as well as a DAW to produce your music. And one thing I will say about Reason is I'm going to go back to the combinator. Reason's combinator, when you're using it in standalone with Reason, you do have the ability to combine and chain not only all of the effects and rack extensions that come with Reason and rack extensions that you buy additionally. But in standalone, you can also use VSTs in your combinator. So if I want to put a Korg M1 and combine it with Europa, or if I want to take the Korg Triton or their new Prophecy board, which is based on the what is it, the Moss board. If I want to take that and combine it with, a third-party rack extension like Expanse, and then combine that with effects, I can do that within Reason's combinator. I can't do it in the plugin version, but I can do it in standalone. Now, if they actually ever do that and allow you to utilize that feature within, the plugin itself, then that'll add some cool points to Reason in terms of the combinator. One thing I will say for Reason's combinator in terms of its advantage, it provides a user with the ability to make an instrument out the gate without having to go through all of the hardships of making an instrument. Like if you've seen the combinator in action with the new update, you can adjust the size of the panel to make it be whatever you want it to be within its limits. You can put all sorts of different buttons on it, and putting the sound together is as simple as using the racks. You could use the subtractor or the grain or whatever device as a sound source, and then use the other plugins and racks to further process that sound or stack and layer that sound. So creating instruments, if you will, are fairly straightforward. The only drawback with Reason at this point in terms of its combinator is that you're technically not creating a new instrument unless you use the samples or the samplers. Using the samplers allows you to bring, new instruments in, if you will, because now you're using source material of your own to actually drive that instrument. If you're using a grain, or not a grain, if you're using a Europa, or if you're using, Subtractor, a Thor, any of those plugins, then you're really not, technically it's not building a new instrument per se, but what it's allowing you to do is to build a nice interface, if you will, as a means to control the different instruments in a device. Reaktor, on the other hand, gives you the ability to build an instrument from the ground up because it uses DSP. However, the drawback with Reaktor, if you're using it to build an instrument per se, if you want to build something more visually appealing, it's going to take a lot more work to do it, because building an instrument in Reaktor, the stock knobs and sliders that they give you to make that instrument work and look appealing is, in my opinion, is not visually appealing when you compare it to Reason's new combinator. It's not as easy to do either. You need a third party device, if you will, or plugin to help you, make that picture, make that interface look nice and neat. And you may even, for certain tasks, coding and scripting may be necessary. But you can get more mileage or go deeper with Reaktor than you can with Reason. So Reason has a trade-off in that regard. If we're talking about what you get from the standpoint of plugins, there's also, Core and Core Player are discontinued. And so if you're talking about having something to stack and layer instruments, I think the closest thing they have now to that is complete control. And I don't know how far it goes into letting you stack and layer and chain different instruments together. What complete control does is it will basically find all of your plugins and put them into a central location so that you can make finding those plugins a lot easier. So that's the difference between the two in a nutshell. So yeah, I'll say this and I'll give my advantages. If you want sheer sounds and sheer flexibility and industry standard, then I would lean more towards the complete library. If you are looking for, good quality sounds that can get you started and you want to build from there and you want a middle of the road approach to creating a customized instrument, so to speak, nothing wrong with Reason from that respect. The price point that they're going to do in October 1st or after October 1st is not something that I'm keen on. So if you feel strongly about withholding your money in that regard, I definitely understand. And if you want something a little bit more in depth in terms of making your sounds, both Kontakt and Reaktor will give you the ability to create custom libraries. You can go deeper than you can in Reason, but it's at the expense of you're going to have to put in more work. Komplete is a little bit more costly, but they do great sales throughout the year. And once you buy into a Komplete, you can always do the summer sale upgrade unless they change that. But Native Instruments has been remarkable in terms of its sound and its sound design and so forth. Reason is no slouch either. And again, if you buy Reason, you do have both the flexibility of a plug-in and a DAW, and you can get very creative. So there is that. Again, you can't go wrong either way. I will say, however, just to close out, and no diss to Reason, Reason is great. If you have Native Instruments, then I would say having Reason is not necessary. This is especially true if you're using a DAW like Ableton and you're using Ableton Suite in conjunction with the Native Instruments. Because if you have those two together, there isn't anything you can't do in terms of making your sounds, because you have a world of power available to you. You would only get something like Reason if you were really keen on having a certain workflow. That's about it. And that's no disrespect to the Reason brand. Reason makes some great stuff. But if you have something like Native Instruments, then I would not go to Reason looking for additional synths. If I had Ableton as a DAW and Native Instruments, again, I probably wouldn't go to Reason, just because, especially if you had Reason Suite. You got not Reason Suite, pardon me. If you got Ableton Suite, then you have everything you need in conjunction with Native Instruments Komplete library to get the job done and make whatever sound you're looking for. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And if you have watched this video all the way through, I appreciate you. And by the way, if you're wondering what DAW this is that I'm using, it is Cakewalk. It is absolutely free, and there are a world of different things you can do with it, including, I just want to point out, you have a staff view, and you have the ability to incorporate video and synchronize it with your music. And Cakewalk is free. So there's that. I may do a video on Cakewalk by itself, but not today. So thank you for watching. It's Tim Keys. I'm out. Peace.